Hello, everybody. The webinar will begin very shortly. We're just going to take a few moments so that everybody can join. So, good afternoon from London, everybody. But I know we have people joining us from lots of different countries today. So, it might be good morning or even good evening, wherever you are joining us from. Great to have you with us here today. We're going to be talking about how to measure and improve the citizens' experience of government. I'm Siobhan Bonita. I'm a former UK senior civil servant. Delighted to be chairing this webinar on behalf of Global Government Forum. We work with civil servants all around the world. And I'd also like to thank our knowledge partner today, that's Qualtrics. So, in terms of the topic for today, the context, I guess, is that governments around the world, I know we say this all the time, but it's true, they've rarely faced as much pressure as they're facing right now. They've had a kind of once in a lifetime pandemic, lots of them high inflation, real budgetary pressures, volatility caused by global conflicts and shifting geopolitics, and then increasing pressure on their workforces. And in light of that, they're trying to constantly improve their services and raise the rising kind of expectations of their citizens in terms of their public services. So today we're going to be looking at how they measure the performance of their public services and how they look to continuously improve the services that they deliver to the public. We have four fantastic speakers with us here today. In a moment, I'm going to introduce our panel of speakers, and then we're going to get the conversation going. I'm going to be asking a few questions, and we're going to have that discussion. But we want this webinar to be as interactive as possible with you, our audience. So at any moment from now on, please do message in your comments or your questions using the QA button. You should see a QA button on whichever device you are using. Please don't wait till the end. Get your comments and your questions coming in. If one of our speakers says something and you've got a question or a comment, please start sending those in, and we'll get through as many of those as we can before the end of today's webinar. So, in terms of our fantastic panel, we've got Honey Dakanai, who is Director General for Digital Policy and Performance at the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat, where she's leading the rewrite of Canada's policy on service and digital and modernisation of Canada's digital standards. Her work impacts 97 federal departments and over $10 billion in annual investments. Previously, Honey led development of Ontario's Simpler, Faster, Better Services Act and led Canada's largest agile governance pilot at Service Canada. Then we've got Heffen Wong, who is Director for the WorkPass Systems and Experience at the Ministry of Manpower in Singapore. I did say we have a very global panel with us today. Heffen leads the product development and modernisation of Singapore's WorkPass systems. Focused on creating excellent public services, Heffen aims to create seamless customer experiences using design, data, and AI tools. Previously, she worked on the design of workplaces and leadership culture she's worked both in London and New York on kind of policy and experimentation and research issues. So great to have you with us here, Heffen. Then we go over to Austria, where we've got Martin Böhm, who is e-government advisor at the Federal Chancellery there in Austria, where he mainly focuses on advancing the sovereign use of artificial intelligence and cloud technologies in public administration and e-government services. And in his role, Martin has overseen several initiatives that contribute to the overall development and integration of AI within the federal administration. Previously, he served as program manager for the IT consolidation program at the Federal Ministry of Finance. So great to have you with us, Martin. Then, last but by no means least, we're going over to the United States, where we've got Amanda Chavez, who is Vice President for Federal Strategy at Qualtrics. Amanda supports organizations to innovate using human-centered design and customer experience best practices. She's got a really extensive body of work, which includes projects with Fortune 50 companies, but also leading over 30 customer experience related projects for agencies right across the US public sector. So, to name just a few of the bodies and agencies and departments that Amanda has worked with, we've got the Small Business Administration, Centre for Medicare and Medicaid Services, the Environmental Protection Agency, Department of Defense, Labour, Department of Homeland Security. The list goes on. So, really extensive experience of work across the American government. Great to have you with us here as well, Amanda. So I'm sure to the audience you agree, we really do have a stellar panel here. Please do use this opportunity to message in questions and comments. I don't want you leaving the webinar thinking, I wish I'd asked that question and I didn't send it in. Because we have such a diverse, I think, group of speakers, I'm going to ask a very kind of scene setting question, really, to kick us off. So, Hefan, I'm going to come to you first for this one. Can you just tell us a little bit about your current role, kind of your priorities in that role, and how you're looking at issues relating specifically to government customer experience?
Hello, thanks for having me on the panel. So I oversee the work pass systems in Singapore, and what we are currently focusing on is modernizing our legacy systems, keeping them running while creating new digital services.
Mm.
So it's been, I would say, slightly more than 10 years in our journey of modernizing our legacy systems. And in the last 10 years, we have seen quite a bit of success
Mm.
in creating great customer experience. So for our new digital services, we consistently achieve more than 90% in customer satisfaction ratings. Um, we have a dual mission
Yeah.
to ensure that we can modernize our legacy systems, create really user-centered digital services while ensuring that our backend rules are accurate, while ensuring that the systems are stable, both across the new and the old systems during the transition period. It's a bit like trying to fly a plane and fix
Mm.
it at the same time.
Mm.
Yeah, so that's our key priorities for now.
Brilliant, Heaven. Thank you. And there's a lot there we're going to come back to. But as you say, I think a lot of people in the audience will have sympathy with that. How do you modernize and update your legacy systems, bringing in a new kind of digital focus, but keeping that service delivery going and making sure that the performance doesn't suffer in the meantime. And also, I think a lot of people would be very envious of the 90% satisfaction levels that you have. I think lots of countries will be striving for that kind of satisfaction ratings. So thanks, Evan. We'll come back and ask some details and specifics about how you're achieving that in a moment. Honey, I'm going to ask the same thing for you. So can you tell us a little bit about kind of what you do, your current role, and what your priorities are?
Sure, happy to do so. Hi, everybody. I'm honored to be here on this panel. My main focus currently at the Digital Policy Division at the Treasury Board of Canada is to renew our policy on service and digital, which is an internal Treasury Board policy that very quietly dictates the rules of how services are designed, delivered, measured across 97 departments. And it's very easy for a policy like this to just essentially be a meaningless set of words. And we want those words to have meaning. We want them to be fit for purpose. We want them to create the enabling conditions for good service delivery. And so we just wrapped up consultations across the government of Canada. And what we're doing right now is stepping back and rethinking the entire rule set. Currently, it covers quite a few domains around the technology, service, data, policies that departments feel are inflicted on them, and they were all written at different times for different purposes, and don't necessarily add to a clear, coherent framework. And so that's why we're trying to simplify and modernize them. But at the core of it is essentially like better citizen experience, better programs and services. So it's not really for its own sake. And so it's the clearest indicator really whether government is doing its job well. And so people are not going to experience government because we updated the policy and or org structure. They'll experience it in the way they encounter services and their journey through that. And so our role is to set up teams to be able to make that journey be clearer, simpler, more respectful, more trustworthy. And so creating the conditions for those teams to succeed.
Brilliant. And honey, I know again we'll come on to the detail of some of this, but is this going to be a big change in terms of measuring success? So are you going to be requiring, for example, officials to measure things where they weren't measuring at all previously?
I think it's more a pivot around, I guess, a recentering around service outcomes, like the service work, rather than just how many widgets or outputs or transactions.
So you're more focused on how well it's delivering what it should be delivering rather than a tick
Exactly.
box kind of thing. Yeah, really
Exactly.
interesting. Thanks, honey. Martin, coming over to you in Austria, can you give us a sense of kind of your role and what you're focused on at the moment?
Sure. Also, thank you for having me. Yeah, so I'm working, as you said, in the Federal Chancellery in Austria, more specifically in the Directorate General for Digitalization and E-Government. I mainly focus on digital sovereignty, cloud and AI in e-governmental services, but the main objectives of the Directorate Generals are digital strategies, it's digital skills as well, digital legal frameworks, and also E and M government. So in Austria, we realize that nowadays the smartphone has become more or less the main device where citizens want to use their e-governmental services, not only e-governmental services, but digital services in general. And so that's why we try to focus on a mobile first approach when it comes to e-governmental services. So we have a lot of services that are mainly focused on the mobile device. Our eID, for example, our also as a platform where we have driver's license, proof of age, vehicle registration, all on the phone. And so our main goal is pretty much to kind of create we call it smart government, where citizens and businesses have the opportunity and are able to communicate and interact with the public authorities digitally, electronically, in a convenient and simple and mobile way, while also still having the possibility to do it in an analog form as well. So we don't want to be straight just digital, but also have the possibility for it. Yeah.
Martin, thank you. So you're focused very much on kind of moving over to not just digital, but mobile delivery of
Digital and mobile, exactly.
digital and mobile. And really, I'm glad what you said at the end there, because one of the questions I might come back to all of you on is it's really good to hear everybody talking about modernization and digitizing services, but what does that mean for some people that can't access digital services? So we'll definitely come back to talk about the potential of kind of exclusion, I think, when it comes to citizens and making sure that nobody gets left behind. That'd be really interesting, your views on that. So, Amanda, I'm going to ask you the same thing. You work with lots of different agencies across governments, but what's your kind of focus in your current role at the moment?
Sure. So in my role at Qualtrics, I set our federal strategy for our federal line of business. And that involves taking all of the policies that are coming out around service delivery, AI, et cetera, and sort of integrating those with the technology that we offer, the AI and data technology that we offer, along with service design. So it's really interesting in the United States. I mean, I think you could just stop there. It's very interesting in the United States at the moment. But, in the founding of the country, government was designed to be slow. It was designed to be slow and bureaucratic. And that was in an effort to make sure that we're not making rash decisions, that there's checks and balances. And it doesn't really line up with the way that we're living now. And we always use this example. I don't know if my global counterparts here use the same example, but if you have the world of information at your fingertips and you can click a button and, Amazon literally I could click it now. I could have something at my door within the next 2 to 4 hours.
Yeah.
That's what citizens expect. We have these immediate, service delivery engines that we're so used to that are embedded in the fabric of how we live in the day to day. And then I think I read before that in the United States, the average citizen has about 100 invisible interactions with the government each day. So if you're comparing the way that, we're living based on how private industry has influenced us versus the way that government was intentionally designed and how they deliver, there's a chasm there. So the work that we're focusing on now is to close that gap. And so, what we're focusing on really is looking at how we're, modernizing data and feedback systems, because part of making those services faster is to find out how it's working across various digital and physical touch points. And if we have to, back when I started this work, around 20 years ago, we did all of that manually, right? I love the head nods here because I feel like you lived it with me then. It was a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of manual tracking. And if we're going to mirror what's happening in the private sector, it has to be more immediate. To enable that too, we're using AI to take away some of the complexity of government interactions. Going back to the start of the United States, some of the agencies that, we serve have been around nearly as long. And so you can imagine that, that has layers of bureaucracy built into it. So, and complexity comes with those layers. So we're trying to use AI and data to remove that complexity and to reduce the burden, the heavy administrative burden that rests on citizens' shoulders at the moment. And we also want to do that through making government more responsive so that people really feel like their needs are getting met by the government and that it's not something that's being forced on them. So that's really where my lens is currently.
Brilliant. Thanks, Amanda. So much actually to unpick there. Really interesting what you said, the comparison between how the private sector can deliver to its customers and the gap between that and the public sector, and that Qualtrics works with organizations to try and close that gap a little bit. I'm going to ask my second question, very much following what you just said there, Amanda, and to the audience as well. If you've already been prompted to think anything, please do send in your comments or questions. But I want to ask all of you, following that kind of first round of things, is what does good citizen experience look like then when it comes to delivery of public services? And I'm going to add on a little bit to my question, which is, should government try and deliver in the same way that the public sector does? Or is there an argument to be saying, actually, we need to be honest with the citizen that we do need to take a bit longer sometimes. Maybe it's safer for whatever reason that we can't deliver like Amazon. There might be consequences if we get it wrong. So I'm just trying to say, what does good look like in terms of government delivering to its citizens? And should governments be aspiring to meet the same kind of levels that the private sector do in delivering out to their customers? I'll mix the order up a little bit. So, Honey, I'll come to you first. Your thoughts on what does good look like?
Sure. So many thoughts about this one. And so when I think about good citizen experience, I think about interactions that just feel clear and respectful. People should know what to expect. They shouldn't have to repeat themselves. They shouldn't feel like they're navigating a maze or reading something in a completely different language. And they should feel that their information is being handled safely and for the right reasons. And so I know that government is always being asked to meet rising expectations. And I know that there's also pressure to mimic the private sector in every way. But I think that where there is clarity, consistency, transparency, and basic humanity in how we communicate, those things are achievable. There are the types of things that governments do. It can never be done in the private sector in the same way. in that they have to be done for everybody. They're usually services that would be given at the most dire point of need. And there are some services that are not things you would call services, like corrections, for example, but government does them. So the work of government is a bit multifaceted. And then it's very easy to be simplistic about, I mean, yes, it should be simpler to change an address for your driver's license, for example, but it probably shouldn't take you the same time it takes you to order a pizza to foster a child or adopt somebody. And so there are some things that require a bit of rumination on the part of the person using the service, and also the type of verification and thinking about when it comes to the service being delivered.
Thanks, Honey. I really like what you say. So in terms of what does good look like, the language needs to be clear. It needs to be easy for people to understand, transparent about the process, so people know what to expect. I really like the fact you mentioned humanity, and there needs to be humanity in there as well, and that they feel like it's a safe, secure space, whatever their conversation with government as well. And also that they only have to do it once, that they don't have to keep repeating themselves. I think that's a big frustration for a lot of citizens. Amanda, I'll come back to you because I don't want to always come to the same order last. So Amanda, your thoughts on what Honey says, does that match what you're saying? Is that bridging the gap? It's not necessarily about pace, is it? It's about all those other things as well.
Yeah, actually, honey, I really love what you said about that too, because in my head, I'm constantly thinking about that also. I love what you said, fostering a child shouldn't take getting that service shouldn't be as simple as ordering a pizza. And I think that, going back to your humanity comment also, honey, I think people understand that too. I think people are, for the most part, rational, and they're just trying to move on with their lives. And when you have to interact with government, government should be filling a gap that the private sector cannot. So, like, for example, I'm not sure that the birth of my children should be registered through a private company as opposed to going through the federal government. And I think, though, that going back to, the private sector's influence, filling out something just once, I mean, that sounds like such a simple statement, but that could honestly be work that we're all doing for the next 20 years, just because, again, of the complexity of government. And, I mean, I'm looking at Martin here too, like the technical debt of, folks who have been building these systems forever. It just takes a lot to get through. And I think citizens are expecting not necessarily perfection, but they want to feel like they're heard, and they want to feel like, they're not getting lost in the system. There have been, I work with some pretty high stakes government entities who serve either huge swaths of the population or the entire population. So I led a workshop recently where, with both customers and citizens, where one of the citizens, it was a beneficiary agency, and one of the citizens was sharing that, she said, I'm not expecting you guys to be perfect. I just want to know that when I completed this form that is required for me to fill out, that you guys didn't lose it.
Yeah.
That is so minimal. And I think if we can do that in, government operations, I think that goes a long way towards gaining trust from
Yeah.
citizens.
And trust is crucial, isn't it, man? And just picking up on what you said there, Stefan, parent or parent, I'm not sure, says government services can take longer to reflect good custodianship, but it should be more transparent with service delivery progress. So exactly what you're saying, keep people informed of where they are, that they're in the system. So yeah, exactly what you're saying there. People want to know that their request has been heard and somebody's dealing with it, and where are you in that kind of process?
Absolutely.
So, Martin, Amanda was kind of asking you a little bit there as well. So, in Austria, in the work you're doing, are you also focused on these kind of issues around trying to streamline it, and so that your citizen only has to do things once, for example, and joining up your departments in terms of service delivery?
Yeah. So that's a good point, because I also wanted to say that I truly believe that this is one of the most important things. We have the project called Once Only,
Hmm.
which addresses exactly that, right? So the idea behind it is if I, as a citizen, give my information to the government, or if the government already has it, it should be able to reuse it in a safe and secure way. But I, as a citizen, won't have to re-upload my information that the government already has, just because I give it to another part or another organization within the
Yeah.
government, right? So this is a big project that we have. And to come to your first question, I have a quote here, or part of a study here, to the question what good actually looks like, and
Mm.
if citizens actually expect to have the same kind of service as private companies. So according to a study that's been done, around two-thirds of respondents in Germany, it's 66%, in Austria it's 62, and in Switzerland it's 63. They still expect to be able to access public services online just as easily and conveniently as those offered by private companies.
Mm. Mm.
So the expectation is definitely there.
Mm.
And of course, there are some limitations to it from the point of view of a government. But what we try to do is make sure that our e-government services are simple, easy to understand, right? Not too complicated. Also very accessible and inclusive.
Yeah.
Also to all different ages, to different digital skills, to different abilities.
Yeah.
Um, and to kind of make sure that they stay consistent across all the channels. So no matter if I call, if I use an app, if I use the website,
Mm.
if I go to a counter, for example, it should always have the same level of quality. Of
Mm.
course, if I do it online or digitally, sometimes it can happen a lot more quicker than if I do it manually. But the option should always be there. So we try to make sure that everybody always has these options and can use the option that is best suited for him or her.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. So, in addition to what Honey and Amanda were saying that good looks like, you're adding in simple, accessible, inclusive, so that those services should be, anybody should be able to access them easily, regardless of age, or ability. And then consistent, like we say, so whatever channel you choose, it looks the same and feels the same as well across different channels. You're not having to learn new ways of doing things all the time. So lots there. So Heffen, anything additional from the Singapore point of view? And I know you similarly have a tell us once approach, don't you, where information should only have to go in one time.
Yeah, that's right. We have a My Info service. So as long as you consent to it, you can pull the data that the government already has and pre-populate your forms. Yeah. But I think for us, if you think about work visa government services, they are usually very opaque. And usually you don't really know why something is approved or rejected. So when we modernize our digital services, we actually design around three things. One is clarity, second is transparency, and third is certainty. So we only require you to fill out data fields that are directly relevant to you. And if you were to indicate certain options, we will decide what to show you next that is directly relevant to your
Mm.
choices. And if you get a rejection, to the best of our ability, we will tell you how to fix the application if there are factors that can be reviewed and changed on your part. Yeah. We have very clear service standards. We provide either approval or rejection or an interim update within service levels, and we audit for them to make sure that our responses are we have a tone of voice, so we have to communicate in a way that's clear, helpful, human, and firm when we need to be.
Mm.
Yeah, so we always remember that we not only play the role of service delivery, we also play the role of a regulator.
Mm.
So we have to stand firm by our policies and our rules whenever they are relevant.
Thanks, Evan. So I like what you said at the end there, that your tone of voice, you also measure the tone of voice, and it needs to be clear, helpful, human, which is mimicking what Honey said earlier. You have to have that human
Yes.
aspect, but also fun. I like that, that the services could be, it could be a fun interaction with
Oh,
government.
sorry, I said firm.
Oh,
from to
sorry,
be,
I thought you
yeah,
said
firm as a
fun.
regulator. Yeah. I wish
Okay.
though.
'Cause
Yeah, we seldom design for fun, but
I
that's
was
a good
I was going to
intervention.
say Hanny could add that in fun in her work that she's doing, that some of it could be fun, but firm. Okay, my apologies. Maybe we
No
should add fun
problem.
at the end of
Yeah,
the,
yeah.
the webinar. That could be good. So you're doing already, I think, what Honey's talking about in the act that Honey's working on. You've built in the requirement for kind of audit and measuring in your service delivery, and that's done on a regular basis, which is interesting to hear in Singapore. We have questions coming in already, so I'm going to go to a couple of our questions. Amanda, this one I think was after something that you said. Jeremy King has said, I understand Amanda's point that people are generally rational. However, in our work, so this, I think Jeremy's from a telephone center, a contact center where people are calling in. We have found post-pandemic and especially post-cost of living crisis that individuals are very keen to explain their personal circumstances and even move to the issue at hand. It takes considerable time. So what Jeremy's saying is actually it seems that people want longer interaction sometimes with government because they want their interaction to be very bespoke. Have you come across that, Amanda? And how do you kind of factor that into how government operates?
Absolutely. Well, I think Jeremy in his frame was being very generous. Rationality when in contact centers. That's God bless you, Jeremy, is what I want to say to you. Because, when you are calling a contact center, oftentimes you're never calling just to say hello to somebody. You're calling because something has gone wrong. And I work with a customer in, again, a very high stakes beneficiary system where they're actually doing exactly what you were talking about, Siobhan. They are going instead of their previous metric was to try to respond to, somebody on the phone within 3 to 5 minutes and then pass them on through their different tiers of service and to just close it out as quickly as possible. And to Jeremy's question, that is not what resolves something. Like, if it takes a long time to get into these problems, so it stands to reason that, it's going to take some time to get out of it. So now that agency is shifting from, 3 to 5 minute call resolution to first contact resolution so
Right.
that they don't, I mean, that could take 30 minutes, it could take an hour. But what that does, and I want to go back to something that I think Heffen said too, you were talking about uncertainty, like sort of mitigating uncertainty for people. Uncertainty, another way to say that is anxiety. When people are not certain about what is happening to them or, what's going to
Mm.
happen next and whether or not they're going to receive the service that they need, that's where anxiety comes from. And, taking care of making sure that a problem is solution is bespoke,
Mm.
making sure that you do take the time that's necessary to solve it, that reduces uncertainty for people while simultaneously increasing trust.
Mm.
And if you don't trust that, going back to your comment earlier about like why is that important? It's important because, again, back to Jeremy's question, if post-pandemic, if I am uncertain about whether or not you're going to take my personal information and handle it with care and, help me solve the problem that I'm calling you for, I am not going to trust you.
Yeah.
So I think all of it's wrapped up in that.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Amanda. And Gabrielle has asked, how do we measure all of these things? So this is great because this was going to be my next question to all of you. How do we actually measure, from your experience, what's working well actually in terms of measuring good performance? And then Gabrielle's come back by saying, by these things, I mean, how do you measure clarity, consistency, transparency, meeting citizens' expectations, etc.? So how do you measure all of that is good, but also that you're being efficient at the same time, because you do have to keep that efficiency. So it's getting that balance right, isn't it? Between taking the time to do all these things in a human way, as you said, but also you have to make sure that you stay within your resources and efficiency. So on the measurement issue, from your experiences and the things that you're currently doing in your countries, what's working well? So Martin, I'll come to you first. In terms of the types of ways that you measure both performance of services, but also how happy your citizens are with those services. What are you doing and what's working well?
Yeah, so we use a mix of a lot of things. So in terms of measuring customer experience and the availability of services, we have pretty much three main benchmarks that we use. The e-government benchmark, which is by the European Commission, kind of compares the quality across the EU member states. It measures things like user friendliness, service availability, transparency, all those things. Then we have the e-government monitor, which is focused only on Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. The study that I quoted before was from exactly this e-government monitor. It goes a bit further, but only focuses on those three German-speaking countries. And then we also have the DESI, the Digital Economy and Society Index, which is also a benchmark that we take part. It kind of ranks the EU member states, the 27 EU member states, by currently it's 42 indicators, which are all kind of aimed up against the digital strategy of the European Union. And so those are our main benchmarks that we use to kind of compare ourselves with the other member states, where we're pretty good, like mobile friendliness. We're pretty good in broadband 5G. But there's also other parts that we still need to improve upon. Kind of one thing that we still need to improve is cross-border registrations of electronical IDs, for example. So there's always something more that you can
Yeah.
do, and you always rank each other up, and so that gives you a better understanding of how you perform and where there's still room for improvement. So that's something that we use quite a lot. But then also we do surveys, we do service tours. We have a future forum where citizens can come and ask questions, where they can kind of give their input on how they see things, on stuff that needs to be addressed or made better. And because you said it before, the kind of making sure that elderly people, for example, also are able to use the digital services. There was a big ID Austria service tour this summer up until I think it ends next week or somewhere before Christmas, where all over Austria there was a team of my colleagues going to different places and actually making sure and helping the people to set up their electronical digital ID within, I think it was 8 minutes per person.
Wow.
So kind of helping everybody to understand it a little bit better. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Martin. Really interesting. So you use a mix of those kind of the big kind of exercises that compare with other countries and they have lots of indicators within them. But then you're also saying you do your own kind of surveys, gathering citizens' input as well and citizens' thoughts about what's working well and what they want to see in the future.
Exactly.
Thanks. So Heffen, I'm going to come to you. Do you similarly, so you mentioned in Singapore that you have a requirement to kind of measure performance. Exactly how do you do that? Is that also a mix of kind of quantitative and qualitative measures? How do you approach that?
So in Singapore, we are required to have a feedback widget. There's a central government digital product, so we have to embed it to our digital services, to our website. It's a smiley face. Then if you click on the smiley face, you will see numbers 1 to 6. And at any point at the end of your transaction or at the start of it, at the end of your transaction, you can rate it. And only if you rate 5 or 6 upon 6 is considered a good rating.
Wow.
Yeah, and after you give a rating, you can give a qualitative feedback, and the agencies can also customize their own questions for the customers. So for us, we approach our digital services like individual products, and we monitor the ratings very, very closely and the qualitative feedback. And using the qualitative feedback, we use it to understand where is the breakage and what's not working. And we put it back into our product backlog, where we go through prioritization every 3 months, and we try to pick up the breakage for customers and enhance our digital services. But at the same time, we monitor our inquiries very closely, especially after we launch a new policy. So we will monitor all the inquiries, and using the inquiries, we will know whether we can quickly enhance the digital services to bring down the inquiries, or we can quickly iterate the content on our website to bring down the calls, the emails. And we can also use it to give feedback to our policy division who created the policies. Sometimes we tell them the rule is a bit too confusing, so it's resulting in this type of inquiries. You have different formulas for similar things, so it's driving a lot of calls. Yeah. But the thing that we use for ratings, because it's mandatory across the government, we have government targets as well. So
Right.
for high volume transactions, if you don't meet the target, you have to explain to the central government why you have not met the target and how are you going to meet the target.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And
Wow.
just one more thing, we also have a central product that automatically scans whether your digital service is accessible. So we follow the WCAG, I think it's the Global Accessibility Guidelines for
Yeah.
digital services.
Yeah.
So it automatically runs and scans your digital services, and it keeps producing reports for your product team.
Okay.
And from time to time, they audit and they will check, have you fixed the accessibility gap?
Right.
And when are you going to fix it? So likewise, we have to be accountable to the central agency if we don't meet accessibility guidelines.
Wow,
Yeah.
thanks, Evan. So you've got a very clear process in place at all kind of stages. So you've got the built-in feedback loop, the widget in the kind of when people are interacting with government. And then, as you say, every time you launch a new policy, it's monitored very closely at the beginning for the first few months, and you're measuring how complicated that is for the users, and then you can quickly kind of iterate and hopefully bring that level of kind of complexity down. And also, I think what's crucial about what you're saying, you've got very good connections with the policy people, so you can feedback if there are issues in the design of that policy. So you're working across those professions. And then the accountability point, as you said, that people need to explain if they're not meeting the targets that they've been set on performance. On the basis of all of that, I'm going to go over to Honey and say, Honey, is that the kind of thing that you're envisaging then, or are some of that already happening in Canada with policies that you already have?
And so some of that is happening in the policy work. And so I'm nodding in recognition in some of the things we're applying as well. And so we have been very seized with Pamela Hurd and Don Moynihan's book on administrative burden. And so we have been taking the time to essentially measure and drive down like the learning costs, like how long it takes for people to figure out how a program works, if they're eligible for a benefit, what documents they need. And so some of those steps we can see online based on like the number of pages people have to navigate or even download, or how they get lost sometimes. And then of course, and the types of calls that people also receive in the call center, or what the various lineups are about. And then compliance costs as well, showing up when people have to take a day off work to actually line up, or also actually apply to get that benefit. And also, or the time it takes for them to complete it, only to get frustrated because they have to gather multiple documents in order to be able to complete the same form or even repeat the same steps. And so realize that they are like some of these things probably could have been more automated, like the time spent online or timed out a lot of the broken transactions. And then also the things we've been trying to do too. I was thinking about what Amanda said earlier around like when somebody is calling, it's primarily because a digital transaction was broken online. And so they're coming at it already from a place of so much frustration. And also, and then last but not least, the psychological costs, which is often underestimated coming from that stress, the uncertainty, as Hafn mentioned, and then the feeling of stigma sometimes when you're made to wait, especially if you're applying for a benefit or you're applying for unemployment insurance, and you're frustrated all that time. And so it will feel like a deterrent to even use the service, or you already have this sinking feeling before you even begin to think, oh no, I have to interact with government. And that's also why we really have started to measure that very heavily and build it into a lot of our systems. But from a central agency angle, we started to look at this from a, I guess, enterprise health angle. And so we are asking departments to essentially, like, especially the ones with high impact, high risk services. So starting with those to tell us about very specific indicators. So volumes, backlogs, processing speed, wait times, client satisfaction. And we also have regular conversations because around, like, again, institutional barriers. So, or to get the context around it. So for example, there might be a seasonal related surge or staffing shortage or a particular process failure. And so to get us like a clearer, more actionable view of whether services are working and where the gaps are between what we want to enforce in policy versus reality. And so we want to highlight those delays and because when something is broken internally, some of these things might manifest catastrophically. So that's definitely the like something top of mind. And then some of the things we automate too, accessibility checking, as well as understanding if there's been a cyber breach. And so, which I think every government now has to worry about 24/7.
Yeah. Thanks, Annie. So as you were saying, building on what some of your fellow speakers have said as well, you are measuring both that satisfaction of the customer and how they're being dealt with, but you do have to bear in mind as well the volume that you're getting through, the kind of backlog that you're dealing with, the processing speed, and it's getting that balance. I think making sure that all of those things are being measured and looked at well.
May I add one last point? Sorry.
Sure. Yeah.
Yes, we also balance it with employee satisfaction. Like, are they proud to deliver the service at the end of it?
Yeah, really important. I think the audience will like you saying that in particular, being an audience of civil servants, definitely. Amanda, I just want to come back because I think it builds on this question of the approach, because Jeremy has come back on what you said. And I think this is really interesting because he's saying that their call length has more than trebled over the last 20 years. And part of that is because most of the easier questions that people have can already be answered on websites and using technology. So by the time somebody decides they need to phone the call center and speak to a human, they're probably having a very complex case that they need to talk through. So I guess my question, building on what Jeremy is saying, is, isn't this where we want to get to? Don't we want to be using technology and digital to deal with all of the kind of routine things so that when you're left with a human interaction, it is those more difficult cases where you need the human in the loop?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's what the data is suggesting too. When you survey citizens, well, I mean, even when you're looking at private sector interactions, you get the same sort of feedback. So I think yes, they do want to see it handled by a human. But I think what all of my peers have said here is something along the lines of, what I'm hearing from them is, measuring things that actually matter to the experience. I think so. We have a lot of policies in the United States that are geared at measuring an improvement and improving, excuse me, citizen services. We also, it sounds like similar to Canada, have what we have designated as high impact service providers, and they're measured on customer satisfaction, whether or not the digital platform was easy to use, efficiency, trust, et cetera. And those are very, like, I think those are sort of the table stakes measures. But, some of what's measured, I think historically is, operational data that tracks activities. So, like, for example, I'll go just make up an example of if you're at a gym and you want to measure its, how well it's offering services. The operational data would be, okay, it offers this many classes, but the data that actually shows you if it's making a difference, if it's making an impact would be, how many people like measures of health, right? Like what, does blood pressure go down? Does, stamina go up, et cetera? And that's what I think the government here in the United States is starting to pivot to also. So not just, how many calls did you take today,
Yeah.
et cetera, but, really drilling down into the experiential metrics that tell you if, something has been resolved
Yeah.
or that you have the solution. And it goes right back to Jeremy's question, about like first call resolution versus, did you get this call done in
Yeah.
3 to 5 minutes?
Yeah.
And there's a very big difference.
Yeah. Thanks, Amanda. I'm going to go to Carlita O'Brien, and this one's probably for you first, Martin. So, Carlita, I think this was sent in when you were talking about inclusion and says, so Carlita said, I understand the need to be inclusive and to allow people the option to use a manual approach if they want to, but how do you ensure that people are just not resisting change? So, because manual will take up a lot more resources than moving to digital kind of service delivery. So again, your thoughts on to what extent are we trying, well, as we improve services, to nudge our citizens into digital delivery or using services in a digital way? Or are we just comfortable to let whoever wants to stay in a kind of more analog world?
Yeah, thank you. No, I think it's an important question, but in my opinion, it's definitely important to always give the option to stay analog, probably in the next few years, let's say. Because it's very possible that in a few more years, digital will be everything, right? And there will not be the need for it, right?
Mm.
But for now, also in talking to my elderly relatives, I realize that it's not always as easy, intuitive, simple as we might think, because we're kind of in a bubble by now, right? Using it all the time, but there needs to be the alternative for it. So if I want to use my mobile phone to uh, I don't know, get a birth certificate, for example, because I need it for a new job, then I might do it on the phone, but there needs to be the possibility for my parents, my grandma, for example, to still do it in an analog way. And what we're trying to do is still give the possibility to improve digital skills. That's a big initiative that we have. So we are doing workshops, seminars, online courses. We have a whole YouTube channel when it comes to how do I use my phone properly? How can I download an app such as the eID, for example? How can I use it? How can I use the biometrical sensors on my phone to verify stuff? So we try to do as much as possible.
Mm.
There's this ID Austria service tour that I mentioned before, where we go across the whole country and try to set it up for people. Also talk to them, explain to them why it might be important in the future if they want to do something. Because as I said before, it is more convenient to do a lot of those steps that you would usually go to the
Mm.
government from your home, for example,
Mm.
especially for elderly people who are maybe not as mobile as they
Able.
used to be
Yeah.
before, right?
Yeah.
But so in my opinion, there still needs to be both options, and it's a good right to have both options. And if somebody doesn't want to go full digital or do it the digital way, that's fine in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Thanks, Martin. Honey, I'll ask you a similar question. So, to what extent do you want everybody to be going kind of digital? And I'm going to add in, Louise has just said, is analog also important for business resilience? So, if there's a cyber attack, for example, do we need to make sure that our kind of infrastructure, our core systems are resilient to cyber issues?
The Canadian context, I think we wanted to be able to offer the service at all channels. Like currently, we want to make digital much easier, and if anything, like would be awarded the same degree of trust that was hard earned in the other channels. And so it for some groups, especially and because of our demographics, like it will be I think that there's a shift probably like as again as Canada's population kind of changes, that might change. But right now, I don't see a part where we would actually be winding down. If anything, that the functions of the various types of channels would be evolving to also be more complementary rather than competing with each other.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, honey. And I'm just going to ask Matt. Matt, you've sent in a question about AI. I don't quite understand it. If you want to just rephrase your question, I might understand it a bit more. I don't totally understand the question. So if you want to just put a follow-up explainer, that would be great. Amanda, your thoughts, though, on the issue of kind of inclusion. And I'm going to ask you slightly differently from your experience of working with so many different agencies and bodies. Do you see, even if people say they're trying to keep both channels open, is there a danger that the analog channel starts to get less attention and therefore we start to see a kind of difference in performance of the digital and the analog delivery?
I love your question, and I think it's probably like the question of the moment that most government entities, across the globe are dealing with. And in the United States, we have a lot of policies geared towards moving towards, going through the digital front door as opposed to the other channels. That being said, but the policies at the moment do reflect digital first, but not digital only. And it's for all the reasons that have been, mentioned here. Vulnerable population, in addition to the elderly, vulnerable populations as well may not have access to your point about, equity and accessibility. They may not have access. And if they have access, it may not be, as easily discernible as it is for other populations. So there is a risk. I would fully acknowledge that. I think there is a risk of trying to modernize government services so much in the digital sphere that it could potentially create an imbalance. And I think I do think, though, that there's a lot of stewards in the federal government, at least in the United States, who see on the front lines what's going on with, customers who go in. For example, there's a lot of physical field offices all over the United States for various services offered through the government. When they're looking at digital intercepts and they're also looking at, who is physically coming through the front door, I think there is a lot of advocacy for making sure that there's attention given to both.
Mm. Thanks, Amanda.
Sure.
And Heffen, so similarly, the question I asked Amanda, so you mentioned in Singapore that you're required to do the scan for accessibility for new digital services. Are you still keeping an eye then on the quality of non-digital service delivery in the same way?
Yeah, we have service standards and we measure our waiting time and the customer footfall very closely. Yeah, so we do measure our in-person services very closely as well.
Thanks, Heffen.
But
So you don't feel like
yeah,
that one is going to outperform the other?
we do make it much faster process if you were to transact digitally. So we incentivize people to move to digital. And what happened during COVID was the digital adoption went up much higher than pre-COVID. So we also took that opportunity to leverage on the momentum, including like digital payments. Yeah, but we will continue to have in-person services. And sometimes they use in-person service combined with digital. So you come in person, but maybe they nudge you to do a virtual call in a physical center. So they teach you how to do the video conference. Yeah, but I don't see calls and physical services going away. Just like Martin shared as well.
So also adding to what Martin said, there's an education piece, isn't there, as well, as how you bring people on in this journey.
Yes.
Teo has asked, and absolutely don't be sorry about this, Teo, 'cause it's an important question. Would everyone say that data is or has to be in a good, healthy, or even elite place, fundamental to measure anything effectively. So this goes to the heart of measuring kind of performance. How do you make sure you're getting the data that you need to measure performance? Amanda, you're nodding a lot at this, so I'm going to come to you first. The importance of good data.
Good data it's absolutely critical. And it's, again, I think a lot of my colleagues here have shared, it has to be captured through different channels and mechanisms. There's, of course, the survey data that, where you're sending it out to somebody and you're pulling information from them. That is really important if you're trying to get not only some quantitative data, but some qualitative data too, to capture sentiment about how people are feeling about a service. I love, though, the ones that are sort of invisible and in the background. So, for example, capturing frustration, mouse thrashes, right? Like rage clicking when, you're stuck in a service or you're stuck at a digital intercept and you're not able to move forward. So, your abandonment rates, your drop-off rates, those tell a story too. And also like gathering public sentiment. So, we collect data also from like Reddit and Facebook to see what public sentiment is. I think those ways that are both visible and invisible of collecting data help to give you a more realistic and comprehensive picture that makes it harder to deny when, something is going poorly or, to give you proof that something is also going well. So I think it's absolutely critical. And I think timing is also very important too. Because if I'm getting a feedback over here and I haven't looked at I'm sorry, excuse me, if I send out a survey and I'm not looking at that for 2 months, that it's very important to be able to close that feedback loop quickly as well.
Yeah, thanks. We've got other questions, but would anybody else like to come in on the data issue, the importance of data? Anybody want to come in on that one?
I think just one point is just start with what you have. And over time, you can clean it and you can establish a stronger baseline. But it's always important to get started. So just start with what you have and then keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, the importance of over time, definitely. So Matt Williams, thank you so much, has come back with, sorry, and I didn't understand this, Matt. Now I understand what you're saying. So Matt has said, it's about how citizens themselves are using AI. So Matt has said that he manages an advice service for citizens. And what they're doing is rather than going directly to the government website where they would get the advice, they are using AI summaries of the advice, which might include some of the stuff from the government website, but it's not just directly the government advice. So how would we then measure their satisfaction, that person's satisfaction with the government advice, if they are going through, say, ChatGPT, for example, rather than going directly to the government site? So I'm going to broaden this out a little bit and say, to what extent are new technologies like AI helping or hindering when it comes to improving and measuring citizens' kind of satisfaction with services? Martin, I'll come to you. Have you had any thoughts on kind of new technologies and how they're impacting in this area?
Yeah, it's an issue that we're looking at as well. Since we also have governmental websites with informations, we also have our own chatbots in place, most of which are still, to an extent, not fully LLM based. So we still have rule-based chatbots with LLM use cases. But the main reason for it being is that we can make sure this way that the information that the recipient is getting is true and verified. If I go onto Google or another search engine right now, or ChatGPT and other services, and ask my question, I might get a very similar answer to my question. But even though nowadays there's usually the information where the AI is getting the information from, it's not verified, right? So there's two possible ways to go about this. Either you could try to make a very similar chatbot onto your websites, but then you have the problem that it might be hallucinating, which we of course don't want. The other option is to just be okay with it, that everybody's using Google or other search engines for retrieving information. If it gets the citizen there faster, or if it gets them the answer faster, it's okay for us, right? The only Right, of course, we can't measure the user experience with it because it's on an external site. But what we try to focus on is making sure our services are getting better, that we get the information, the user experience there, and everything else we can't control either way, right? So we're trying to making sure that we have enough information out there so that the people can get it if they want to get it. But if they decide to use another AI tool or search engine, it's of course their choice.
Yeah. Thanks, Martin. Honey, your thoughts on kind of new technologies, including AI, and the extent to which they are helping governments to improve and measure services, but also maybe, as we've just maybe throwing some friction in as well.
Okay, fair enough. And so I guess mixed bag right now as the tools are evolving. But in terms of how it's changing how we measure, I guess even if somebody learns about a service or an AI tool, like I guess we would instrument the parts of the service that we control. So we know that people still likely end up having to fill out an application, submit documents, or authenticate in some way. And so those particular touch points give us the real signals around satisfaction, completion rate, error rate, abandonment, retries, time to complete, processing time. So if something is going wrong upstream, for example, AI tools giving unclear instructions, it will likely manifest downstream. And then, of course, the qualitative side too, like there's user testing, post-transaction surveys, interviews. Like we did ask, like, where did you start? What did you search? What made sense? What didn't? And then increasingly, people will tell us they began with an AI tool, and then that becomes our way of also kind of being able to indicate. And then, of course, like some indirect indicators, like they misinterpret what they were able to search or get a summary of, and so they miss a step, and then they end up having to call or get or submit something, and so that also reveals to us sort of whether or not like the answers aren't aligning with authoritative content, and so then gives us a sense too around how do we ensure that AI systems are drawing from authoritative structured government content, and so looking at the different ways too about how we publish our information so that it is reused, restructured accurately when it's summarized. And so more or less dependent on website visits as the main indicator.
Thanks, Annie. So really interesting that, as you say, you can measure downstream where they initially made that contact and then see how it's progressed from there. So really interesting. And Hefan, I'm going to ask you as well, because one thing we always hear about Singapore is that you're using kind of new technologies in all sorts of different ways, maybe that other countries aren't. So your thoughts on kind of AI and how that's helping or hindering in terms of improving delivery of services and measuring performance.
For a lot of our AI tools, I mean, we do have central government AI tools, so and we have very high adoption with our public servants, but we are quite careful with the public interacting with it directly. So a lot of our adoption has been used by public servants to improve your responses to customers. How do you appease an angry customer? How do I nuance my comms? How do I search for information faster? But for public-facing tools that are subject to hallucination, I think the ones that have go live are not many, and we have new guidelines. You have to pass certain guidelines and get certain approval before you can have a product go live that is based on an LLM model. I would say trust is a very important currency for us, so we are quite careful and having the man in the loop at the moment. So public-facing Gen AI tools, we have not done it on a large scale yet. Yeah, but I would say we are making small steps.
Yeah. Thanks, Evan. Amanda, I am going to come to you in a moment, but just to say, I just want to say to Gabrielle, because we've only got a couple of minutes left, Gabrielle's question was around how do you measure fraud and error? I think that's a whole nother webinar. We've got lots of webinars we've done on fraud and error, Gabrielle. So please do look on the Global Government Forum website. You'll be able to watch on catch up some of the previous webinars we've done on fraud and error, and I'm sure we will do more of those kind of in future. But Amanda, your thoughts on kind of AI and new technologies and how they're impacting on performance and measurement?
Absolutely. Well, to go back to something that Martin said, in terms of how people are getting the information about a government service, the outcome is what, I think we're all really interested in measuring. I don't know if this is a paradigm everywhere, but the jobs to be done paradigm, if you are able to successfully get somebody to, the end of their journey, I think that's what's really important. I mean, I think we're all living the power of AI and that also the sort of disappointment of AI as well. I mean, in terms of the day to day and what we're seeing with customers and how we help them. I mean, I think we've all a through line throughout this conversation. I think has been reducing burden for
Mm,
people and how
mm,
that engenders trust. I'm old enough and I've been, in service of government for long enough to know how inefficient and how much time it took to do all of that manually.
mm,
The fact that, you can automate workflows and close feedback loops instantly, or near instantly through AI is amazing. And the fact that you can look at problems in aggregate
mm.
accurately is also something that's stunning. And also having accessible information too, like going back to, people are using ChatGPT, et cetera. Well, now, like again, shy of making sure that the data source is accurate, it can democratize sort of, folks and their understanding.
Mm.
But there's always that drawback too, and the disappointment that we're facing is that you get hallucinations, you can get misinformation. I think I've read too that a lot of, speaking of ChatGPT, a lot of their data modeling is coming from Reddit, and a lot of Reddit answers are coming from AI bots. So
Mm.
if AI is
Yeah,
just feeding AI, you're going to get slop.
yeah,
So that's the risk there too. And conversely too, if you're not using the right modeling, you might have equity concerns as well. So there's,
mm,
but it's like any emerging technology too. We're just at the
mm.
beginning, and the possibilities for help and harm are great at this point,
Yeah,
and we'll all be on a fun journey together figuring
yeah.
that out.
And I know because I've done webinars, there's a whole nother area, isn't there, where new technologies can be used by bad players to make people think they're talking to government when they're not talking to government. So kind of very, very realistic fake sites and things like that. So it's a whole nother level, I think, of area. Um,
Absolutely.
we are almost out of time, but Jeremy has come back in. Thanks so much, Jeremy, and to everybody in the audience for all those great questions. But I just very quickly, if you've got thoughts on this, because Jeremy's come back on our conversation we had about the changing nature of people working in call centers, for example, and agreed that the time's getting longer. But he's saying then it's people aren't staying as long in those call centers in jobs, so it's putting pressure on recruitment, for example. I just wonder, it's really interesting to me. We often talk about modernizing public services and how the civil servant of the future is going to need to be digitally literate in the way they haven't before, regardless of what profession they're in, because everything's going to be done digitally. Are we overlooking the fact that also the civil servant of the future is going to need better communication skills? Because when they do talk to the public, they're going to be dealing with these more complex cases because technology is going to be dealing with the routine stuff. So are we maybe already too slow on realizing that some of those important communication skills, human skills, we talked about human at the beginning, we also need to be thinking about those in the workforce of the future if we're going to let technology deal with some of the routine things. That's my final question to all of you is what do we need in terms of our future workforce to make sure we give customers the best services that they expect? Honey, I'll start with you first.
It's easy to take for granted the role of somebody in the call center. It tends to be like the entry point to government. And so, but if anything, I think we need to take more care about like well, I guess a future version or even today's version of the person who works in that call center will no longer cannot be expected to primarily stick to a rote script, and because AI can do that. We're looking for somebody with emotional intelligence, with the problem solving, judgment, being able to navigate systems and complex and understand in a very quick way, like how to create clarity for the person on the other end of the line. And so, if anything, like this service work requires so much more skill and not less. And because we're asking them to interpret policy, understand context, and support the person on the other end through ambiguity and not just read something on a screen. And we also, as part of that, and I think part of the reason that there's burnout is that they primarily are on the receiving end, but they aren't able to translate some of the things that they're hearing into something that actually becomes like feedback at the systems level. And so how do we make sure internally in the organization that that information actually gets used to improve the service so that we don't end up burning them out. We don't end up putting them in positions where they're carrying all the emotional labor for what is mostly an opaque and big organization.
Yeah, thanks. So they feel like their interaction is making a difference, really important. Thanks.
Exactly.
Martin, do you agree with that? Do we need, as we're talking about building up digital skills, do we also need to be building up these emotional intelligence skills as well?
Definitely, yes. I fully agree with what Hani said. So we need to do that. We need to be, or also the workforce of the future needs to be literate and emotionally capable to be withstanding these tasks that are coming. But because we were talking about AI itself is not in my opinion at least, it's not the solution to absolutely everything, right? So especially in the governmental service, the idea that we will let AI automate everything that we do and just go home and do nothing else is not going to happen, at least not in the next few years. But it can be a great addition and support for also workers in a call center in terms of knowledge management, in terms of research addition to everything you do. So it can help quite a lot, and that's why also digital skills, as you said before, are very important and are going to be very important in the future.
Thanks, Martin. And Amanda and then Heffa, we've got 1 minute left. So Amanda, your thoughts on this, the future, will we need all sorts of skills going forward, not just the digital ones?
Absolutely. So, in just talking about, being at the beginning of AI and all emerging technology, we have enough history with it to know that the certain skills and capabilities that humans bring to bear that are immutable, caring about the mission of a government agency so that you take very personally the citizen on the receiving end getting services that help improve their day-to-day lives, that's immutable. And it does not matter what technology we put in place. The other skills too, the critical thinking, the problem solving, the empathy, to some extent too, there can be training around that. But the care and the taking personal, the mission, I think that will cover a lot of sins and I can't think. Oh, sorry. We're at the end of my brain power too. So you guys get where I'm going.
We get where you're going. Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
That can't be replaced, really, can it?
That's
By
right.
any kind of technology. Thanks.
That's right.
Evan, final thoughts to you. What would you like to add on this kind of what skill set will people need to deliver to the customer in future?
What skill sets? I will say the future of public services is just more human, and that's how I agree with the rest of the panel. Yeah.
Evan,
And all the skill sets that Hani mentioned that build us into humanizing public services, of which some of it will be automation and how the humans will level up to deliver a different kind of more complex service. Yeah.
Heaven, thank you so much. I love that note to finish on because I think what we've ended up, we started, I think, with talking a lot about empathy and human, and we've ended up, I think, coming back to empathy and human, which I always love when we're talking about digital modernization, that actually it's bringing back the human into the center of all this, and technology should be used to make us more human, not less human. So I think that's a great way to end. Thank you so much to all of you. I really enjoyed that conversation. Thank you to our audience for sending in so many great questions as well. But to Heffen, to Honey, to Amanda, and to Martin, thank you so much for all of your expertise. I know, especially, you're all in different time zones, but Heffen, I know it's very late for you. Thank you for staying up late, and to Amanda and Honey for making an early start for us as well. Thanks to Qualtrics for being our knowledge partner for today. We will send everybody who registered today, and to those who watch live as well, we'll make sure that we send you the video of today's conversation so you can watch it all again or pass it on to colleagues who you think might find today's conversation useful. We've also sent people who registered a short questionnaire. I'd be hugely grateful if you could take a couple of minutes, it's very quick, just to answer those questions in the questionnaire. It means that at Global Government Forum, we always give you webinars that are of most interest to you. That's us getting our customer feedback and making sure we serve you as well as possible. And we will also send a write-up. We'll be doing a write-up of today's conversation with the key themes and points, and that will come round in a week or so's time. Thank you so much to the audience, and thank you so much to our great panel. Enjoy the rest of the day wherever you are, and I hope to see you on another one of our webinars again very shortly. Thanks, everyone. Thanks. Goodbye.